Well, the wait is finally over. After a long offseason filled with a ton of trades, free agency changes, and rumors swirling, we have arrived at the opening night of the new season, where we watched two matchups featuring some of the top NBA teams in the league filled with some top talent go down. The Boston Celtics faced off against the New York Knicks, and the Los Angeles Lakers faced off against the Minnesota Timberwolves to kick things off tonight. And while there's a long season ahead of us still, there's also quite a bit we can already take away, and that brings us to today's video. Today we'll be going through the 4 biggest lessons learned from the opening slate of games, with each one being something worth keeping an eye on for the rest of the season. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but it also very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first lesson learned from tonight's NBA season opening slate of games is that Mikal Bridges' jumper might actually be broken. Throughout the entirety of the training camp and preseason period this year, there have been a lot of rumblings and concerns over Mikal Bridges and some of the tinkering that he's been doing with his shooting form. Admittedly, when I first saw these rumors swirling, I took them with a grain of salt, because this has actually been a recurring theme in the off seasons of the past with Mikal Bridges, as we saw similar practice videos coming out during his time with the Phoenix Suns and Brooklyn Nets. He seems to practice a lot with a bit of a hitch in his shooting form during the offseason. But before this year at least, his shot would always return to normalcy by the time the regular season came around, and he's shot above league average from 3 in 5 straight seasons. So of course, I wanted to wait until the real action got underway before casting any judgment, and let me just say, things are looking a little bit worrying for sure. In the preseason, he shot a combined 2 of 19 from 3, which included a game where he shot 0 for 10 from deep. And the worst part of it all is that most of the misses don't even look like they're close to going in. This, of course, continued tonight when he shot time after time, missing shot after shot from deep, and then things got out of hand. His form in-game is still wonky and slow, the misses are way off, clanking hard off the rim, and he doesn't look comfortable rising to fire at all. The Knicks traded away a king's ransom in draft capital to acquire Bridges this offseason, because his two-way production on the wing was supposed to help him take the team to the next level. But if he continues to be a liability from the perimeter, then the Knicks' spacing becomes a genuine issue, and the team's lack of other creative offensive weapons keeps a lot of the burden on Jalen Brunson's shoulders. The next big lesson learned from the opening night is that the Celtics are still comfortably in control of the Eastern Conference. With all of the big moves made, all of the free agency madness, and a lot of the natural development expected of younger stars year after year, it's easy to buy into the hype of the teams that are coming in with a fresh new look and forget about the teams that dominated last season. But when it comes to the Celtics, they reminded everybody exactly why they were able to dominate last season and how that's not changing anytime soon. The Celtics honestly had a pretty quiet offseason after winning the NBA Finals last year, with their biggest moves being the fact that they gave out some contract extensions to some of their key players that they already had, because they didn't really make any significant additions at all. The thing is though, they're so clearly good enough to get away with that, and even though that's seen as boring in the eyes of many fans, they're still sitting in a tier above the rest in the East until proven otherwise. Last season, the Celtics were ranked as a top 2 team both offensively and defensively. They easily have the best starting 5 in the NBA, with total balance, top tier shot making at every position, sharpshooting at every position, and competent depth. The Knicks were projected by most to be the Celtics' biggest threat this year, yet they got absolutely obliterated by the Celtics tonight without Kristaps Porzingis even being healthy to play. The Knicks were are one of the most active teams this summer, putting together a starting five that looks very nice on paper, but as we saw tonight, the cohesion of that group still needs a lot of work, and some flaws were already exposed. Mikal Bridges' shooting may be a real issue, as we just discussed. Guys like OG Anunoby and Josh Hart aren't creative volume scorers by any means. Karl Anthony Towns' defensive issues are easy to exploit once again now that he's back as a full-time starting center, and Jalen Brunson alone can't match the firepower that the Celtics have at their disposal. So once again, the Celtics are comfortably in the driver's seat. The next big lesson learned from the opening night tonight is that the Timberwolves still have a concerning turnover problem. The Timberwolves broke out last season, making it all the way to the conference finals, and going into this year, there was even more excitement about another potential leap with Anthony Edwards getting better and better, but despite all of that success, there was one big underlying weakness with their decision-making last year, and that was the fact that the team struggled with turnovers. The Timberwolves ranked in the bottom third of the league in turnovers per game last year, and the only other team that made the playoffs last season that committed more turnovers than them was the Suns. So compared to the competition they will be facing when it matters, they were one of the worst in this regard. There's a lot to like about the return they got in the Karl Anthony Towns trade, because Julius Randle is a highly skilled forward and a scorer overall, and he brings a lot more of a level of toughness to their lineup, but he's also someone who has had pretty poor decision-making and turnover problems throughout his career, and tonight against the Lakers, the team as a whole went down big in the first half because they committed 10 turnovers in that half alone. The West is going to be an absolute bloodbath this season, so if they want to stay in the mix at the top, they really need to figure out how to play cleaner basketball on the offensive end and how to take care of the ball more consistently, because the amount of turnovers they committed tonight will not cut it. And finally, the last big lesson learned from the opening night's slate of games is that JJ Redick is actually a competent NBA coach. When it got announced that JJ Redick was going to be the new head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers this summer, there were a lot of doubters due to the fact that Redick doesn't really have any coaching experience, not just at this level, but at all. Of course, there are plenty of former players that have transitioned into coaching roles soon after their playing days ended in the past, but Redick was working as a podcaster and an ESPN analyst before getting hired, which is admittedly a bit of funny context. The truth is, though, Redick's work in those roles really did demonstrate the fact that he has an exceptional understanding of the modern NBA game, and his attention to detail and focus on the nuance earned him the respect of his peers in that regard, and right off the bat, he has the Lakers looking much more organized than they did under former coach Darvin Ham. Ham used to get killed by fans and the media for his questionable rotations and lineups, his inability to adjust, and the lack of depth with his offensive philosophy, and tonight, the Lakers checked all three of those boxes for improvement in the best way. Their offensive sets genuinely were putting players in positions to succeed, the rotations and lineups were all much more balanced, and he always had an answer to when the Timberwolves made a run. The Lakers may not have made many changes this offseason, but sometimes just a fresh new face in charge can rejuvenate a stagnant group.